The Black Knight, the mystery that won't let go. What if I told you that there is an object in space that defies explanation, an object that was not created by any space agency, has no official owner, and whose origin remains shrouded in mystery? You might think it's just another fantastic myth or a publicity stunt, but the story of the Black Knight will surprise you. You've probably heard about the Black Knight, a satellite that wasn't launched by humans but has been orbiting our planet for years. But how did it end up in orbit, and who is behind its creation? The answer to this question is hidden in the dark corners of space, and this enigma continues to haunt scientists. Signals from space, the beginning of the journey. Long before humans even thought about creating satellites, our world was already receiving signals from space. It all started in 1899, when the brilliant Nikola Tesla was conducting experiments on wireless energy transmission. In fact, he didn't just come up with ideas for future technologies, but also began to pick up strange signals that couldn't be explained by any earthly sources. This wasn't just static, this was a clear signal, which Tesla interpreted as a message from outer space. It was too strange to be a coincidence. But what was it? For a long time, scientists and researchers couldn't find an explanation. Ordinary radio waves, it seemed, couldn't have caused these signals. This mystical phenomenon marked an important milestone in the history of space exploration, but it still didn't provide any clear answers. Forgotten satellites and space paranoia. Decades passed, and by 1954, more strange reports began to emerge. During this time, amateur radio operators around the world began picking up unusual signals, seemingly coming from objects in Earth's orbit. Amid the Cold War, this sparked concern. If the Soviet Union could launch satellites, it meant the US should have been doing the same. But here's what was strange. No one knew about satellites moving along unconventional orbits. At this time, rumors started circulating about mysterious objects keeping watch over our planet. Some claimed these were satellites created by an unknown civilization. Others suggested they were just space junk, but none of the theories could explain the behavior of these objects. The Black Knight, the first glimpse. In 1960, the rumors intensified, and many experts began stating that Earth was being monitored by a mysterious satellite. Then, in 1998, during the STS-88 mission, astronauts accidentally snapped a photo while flying, capturing something that would be debated for years. In one of the images, a dark object was clearly visible against the backdrop of Earth. It looked like an artificial satellite, but its shape and structure didn't resemble anything we knew. This was too strange to be ordinary debris. Moreover, the object was clearly moving in orbit, not just some discarded space junk. For everyone who saw these photos, this dark object became the embodiment of a true cosmic mystery, full of unanswered questions. What was it really? There are many theories, but none of them offer a definitive answer. Some scientists argue that the Black Knight is an ancient satellite placed by an unknown civilization, perhaps even before humans arrived. This satellite could have been designed to monitor our planet, or serve some other purpose that remains unfathomable to us. It seems like it's from another era, another time. Others believe the Black Knight is an artificial object created by extraterrestrials. The theory that aliens might be observing us is nothing new. According to some researchers, this object could have been sent as part of a study of earthly life, acting as some sort of spy satellite to watch humanity. It might be part of a hidden project that's beyond our understanding. But there's also the more down-to-earth explanation. Some believe it's just space debris that accidentally ended up in Earth's orbit. But with each new photo and each new investigation of the Black Knight, this theory seems less and less likely. Why do we still not know? What's most surprising about this story is that, despite all efforts by scientists, we still don't know what the Black Knight actually is. Official agencies remain silent, and space agencies aren't rushing to share any information about it. Perhaps this is the greatest mystery of all. The Black Knight isn't just a satellite. but something more, something beyond our understanding. It might be a witness to ancient history or a messenger from the future observing our development. This object continues to inspire researchers, raise questions, and stir the imaginations of people worldwide. No matter what's really behind it, the Black Knight remains a living symbol of the mysterious and unexplored cosmos. We can only guess what it really is and what answers it holds. But one thing is certain, its mystery will not leave you indifferent. The future of the Black Knight. With each passing year, the mystery of the Black Knight grows deeper. Space missions continue to explore our satellite world, and scientists are increasingly discussing its origin. Who knows, perhaps one day we will solve this riddle. But until then, the Black Knight will remain one of the most intriguing objects in space. And maybe, just maybe, we will witness the moment when a new chapter of history unfolds in space. Perhaps this dark satellite will be the key that opens the door to a new world, a world we still don't understand.
The legend of the Black Knight satellite tells us that a spaceship of extraterrestrial origin has been orbiting Earth for many years. Sounds crazy, right? But over the years, the supporters of the theory have gathered a lot of evidence to prove it. So let's look at it and judge for ourselves. 1899. Famous scientist Nikola Tesla built a giant tower in his laboratory in Colorado Springs. This tower was supposed to allow him to study atmospheric electricity and wireless energy. Everything went fine until one day he discovered something unexpected. The tower began to catch a signal that seemed to be artificial. At first, Tesla thought that the signal was coming from somewhere in the atmosphere, but it turned out that it had been coming from an even greater height, from outer space. Tesla decided that this signal was sent by some extraterrestrial life. However, the scientific community ignored his theory. Although they respected Tesla's genius, they still considered him to be a weirdo. But a few years later, Tesla's reports were confirmed. The inventor of the wireless radio, Guglielmo Marconi, intercepted similar signals. Then in 1927, Norwegian radio engineer Jørgen Hals noticed something unusual. When he sent signals at a certain wavelength, they were sent back to him a few seconds later. At first, he thought it could be an ordinary radio echo. It's not uncommon for short radio waves to bounce between Earth and the stratosphere. This phenomenon is called propagation. But usually it happens very quickly, in about 1/7 of a second after the original transmission. However, the signals that Hals received took about 15 seconds to get back. They also didn't match the radio echo people were used to. The engineer wasn't the only one to witness this phenomenon. Many radio enthusiasts discovered and confirmed these signals, but no one found any explanation. So what was it? Could Tesla have been right this whole time? Let's unpack this. First of all, the signals did exist, and they've been documented by many people. However, Tesla and Marconi's signals and Hall's echoes are completely different things. In reality, Tesla and Marconi caught signals coming from pulsars. Pulsars are rapidly rotating neutron stars. Those get born when stars greater than our Sun finish their life cycle. After that, they become neutron stars and receive such a strong impulse that they begin to rotate at an insane speed. At the same time, the radio waves pulsars emit reach very far as our planet. Pulsars were discovered only in 1968, so it's not surprising that Tesla and Marconi couldn't explain the data they had received. But what about Jørgen Hals? What he discovered is now known as LDEs, or long-delayed echoes. It's a more complicated concept because, to be honest, these echoes still remain a mystery. Scientists suggest that LDEs may be caused by something in Earth's atmosphere, or they might be reflected from the Sun's plasma clouds or even from the Moon. Unfortunately, we don't know the truth yet. The next incident took place in 1960. The New York Times published an article which said an unidentified silent satellite has been discovered circling Earth in a near-polar orbit by United States tracking stations. The identity and origin of the mysterious satellite, which has been dubbed the Dark Satellite, are unknown despite nearly 2 weeks of tracking. Many people believe that this must be the famous Black Knight satellite. However, later scientists confirmed that it was actually the remnants of a regular satellite that had gone astray. It malfunctioned and the thrusters sent it in the wrong direction, they claimed. Anyway, this whole story led to renewed interest in the Black Knight satellite. Astronomers all over the world started claiming to have observed it. Almost any strange celestial object could become the famous dark spaceship. But up to this point, all the photos and data about the Black Knight satellite have come from observatories on Earth. To prove or disprove its existence, people needed some witnesses in orbit. Gordon Cooper was a pilot and one of the first astronauts in human history. In 1963, he took part in the longest American space mission at that time, Mercury Atlas 9. During the flight, he discovered some strange green object, possibly of extraterrestrial origin, in front of his module. He then told his crew on Earth about that. NBC News picked up on the news and tried to interview Cooper about it, but strangely, neither NASA's mission transcripts nor Cooper seemed to give much importance to this fact, as if that didn't happen at all. Later, the official NASA's explanation was there was an electronic malfunction on Cooper's craft. It led to increased levels of carbon dioxide, which in turn caused Cooper to hallucinate. Cooper agreed with this version. Maybe it's just a curious coincidence that when he retired, he became interested in searching for extraterrestrial life. But even if we assume that all this is true and there is some mysterious spaceship in Earth's orbit, what do they want from us? Why would they be watching us? In 1973, Duncan Alasdair Lunan, a Scottish researcher, decided to investigate this. He gathered all the data on LDEs collected by Norwegian scientists and began to study it. Suddenly, he noticed some deviations that could hide a code. He arranged the data into a graph, where one axis meant the delay in time between the echoes, and the other the position of the echo in the sequence. It turned out to be a collection of dots which looked like some sort of space map, namely the map of the constellation Vortis. Lunan began to analyze the echoes recorded by French astronomers in 1929. Again, he got the same constellation, but one of the stars was in a slightly different place. Lunan then thought, what if it's actually a star map from the past? After rewinding the time, Lunan finally got the whole picture. He discovered that this was how the constellation looked 13,000 years ago, which probably meant that they could have been watching us for thousands of years. In 1973, Lunan gave an interview to the British magazine Spaceflight. He said that he had deciphered the radio message hidden in the LDEs. Here is what it said. Start here. Our home is Upsilon Bootis, which is a double star. We live on the sixth planet of 7 coming from the Sun, which is the larger of the two. Our sixth planet has 1 moon. Our fourth planet has 3. Our first and third planets each have 1. Our probe is in the position of Arcturus known in our maps. Goosebumps. But even though these reports were published in the New York Times, Time, and other well-known magazines, no one really took this topic seriously. Unfortunately, Lunan's theory wasn't really backed up by any evidence. Later, he withdrew it himself, saying that he had made obvious mistakes and that his methods had been unscientific. According to him, he had just been making guesses about what these signals might mean. And finally, the last part of our story. This photo. On the 4th of December 1998, the Endeavour spacecraft embarked on the STS-88 mission. This was the first mission to the International Space Station. And then, on the 11th of December, NASA took and published a series of images where you could clearly see an unusual object in Earth's orbit. These photos were immediately picked up by the public. Everyone thought it was the Black Knight satellite, which had been discussed for years. Had it finally been found after 100 years of speculation? But as usual, the truth turned out to be much more boring. During the mission, one of the astronauts was installing a thermal cover, but the coating was poorly fixed. It broke off and flew away. The photos were taken just to document this event. The Black Knight is a very interesting legend. You can dig into it for hours, looking for new information and evidence, and then watch it getting debunked. This story is a pile-up of many completely unrelated stories, reports, photos of real satellites, and so on. All this was mixed into one incoherent, illogical urban legend. Illogical but very fascinating indeed.
In December 2016, a bombshell revelation rocked the world of classified intelligence. WikiLeaks had released top-secret Pentagon documents exposing a hidden war between the US Air Force and unidentified flying objects. According to these explosive files, the center of this interstellar conflict was none other than Antarctica, Earth's most remote and enigmatic continent. During the summer of 2016, the US Missile Defense System detected an entire fleet of UFOs rising from the Southern Ocean and heading at high speed toward the Mexican coast. American fighter jets were immediately scrambled, but just as suddenly as they appeared, the mysterious objects vanished from radar, leaving behind only questions and ripples of fear in high-ranking circles. And this, insiders claimed, was only one of many such encounters in a long-running, covert battle beneath the ice. The story spread like wildfire across forums, alternative news sites, and YouTube channels. Eyewitnesses reported that the surfacing UFOs created enormous waves, damaging ships in the area. Other reports spoke of alien bases discovered deep beneath Antarctic ice, with entire zones marked off-limits to the public. Some even claimed that Russian President Vladimir Putin was being briefed on secret skirmishes between US forces and non-human entities. The truth seemed ready to explode into public view. But how much of this is real? And did WikiLeaks actually publish such world-shattering documents? Since 2010, WikiLeaks has indeed released hundreds of thousands of files, diplomatic cables, military reports, and surveillance data. While some documents reference unusual aerial phenomena, none mention extraterrestrial conflict in Antarctica. The story's origin can be traced to a post on European Times, a dubious website known for spreading unverified claims. It cited anonymous Russian intelligence officers as the source. From there, the tale snowballed through conspiracy blogs that forged fake scans of supposed US documents, complete with seals, signatures, and official stamps. Yet under closer examination, these documents crumble. Fonts are inconsistent with military formatting. Signatures are copy-pasted from unrelated sources, and crucially, no corroborating evidence exists. Why did this theory stick? Despite its shaky foundation, the story refuses to die. Why? 1. Real secrecy in Antarctica. The continent is governed by strict international treaties. Military activity is restricted, creating a veil of mystery that invites speculation. 2. Historical myths. Tales of Nazi bases, ancient alien ruins, and lost civilizations buried under Antarctic ice have long fueled the imaginations of conspiracy theorists. 3. Real UFO sightings. The US military has confirmed encounters with unidentified aerial phenomena, such as the famous 2004 Tic Tac incident, adding legitimacy to UFO narratives. 4. The WikiLeaks halo. For many, anything associated with WikiLeaks automatically seems credible. That association lent weight to the fabricated documents. Antarctica's vast, silent expanse is a fertile ground for myth-making. From secret bases to wormholes, the continent has become a canvas for every kind of fantastical speculation. Even real locations like Lake Vostok, a subglacial lake Russian scientists spent decades drilling into, have been dragged into alien lore despite zero scientific evidence. Unusual military flights near Antarctica in 2016 and 2017, including Boeing RC-135 reconnaissance planes, added fuel to the fire. Officials cited training and climate research, but to believers, they were part of a hidden campaign against otherworldly threats. The tale of a secret UFO war exposed by WikiLeaks is thrilling, but ultimately, it doesn't hold up. There's no credible documentation, no trustworthy sources, and no confirmation from WikiLeaks itself. Like many conspiracy theories, this one blends fragments of truth with layers of fiction, creating a narrative too seductive to let go. But seductive isn't the same as true. Behind the allure lies a stark reality. No aliens, no Antarctic war, just another myth, thriving in the shadows of secrecy. and our eternal hunger for the extraordinary. Still, as long as Antarctica stays silent, the legends will grow, because nothing feeds the imagination like a blank, frozen slate at the edge of the world. It's the year 1977, and astronomers are stunned. They've just picked up a bizarre and really powerful radio signal coming from the direction of the constellation Sagittarius. The signal shockingly matches the frequency of neutral hydrogen. What's the big deal? This is the very frequency many astronomers believe might be used by extraterrestrial civilizations trying to communicate. Since then, the signal has become legendary in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence, aka SETI, community. But what exactly was that mysterious signal? To understand this, let's go back to the 1970s when the Ohio State University Big Ear Radio Telescope was active. For more than 2 decades, from 1973 to 1995, it played a major role in the university's SETI program. By the way, it was the longest-running SETI project in history. And in 1977, Big Ear detected something extraordinary, the WOW signal. This wasn't just any signal. It was a strong, narrowband radio signal, right near the important neutral hydrogen frequency. The Big Ear telescope might be gone now, but the mystery of the WOW signal still fascinates scientists today. Imagine this. You want to tell an extraterrestrial civilization about humans. How would you describe our average height? We can't use feet or inches because these units mean nothing to them. Even here on Earth, we don't all use the same measurements. To communicate with other civilizations, we need a universal way of conveying information. Luckily, the emission of light by matter comes from an electron jumping between quantum states in an atom. This process, governed by quantum mechanics, results in specific and fixed radiation frequencies and wavelengths, no matter where you are in the universe. Since we believe the laws of physics are the same everywhere, these wavelengths are universal. This makes them a perfect standard of measurement that any civilization could understand. For example, on the Pioneer spacecraft's gold plaque, we used a particular wavelength as a unit of length to describe information about humans and the spacecraft's origin. So, if an extraterrestrial civilization wanted to talk to us, they could have used the frequency of the WOW signal. And that's pretty amazing. The signal lasted the entire 72 seconds that Big Ear was tuned in. A few days later, astronomer Jerry R. Amon was looking over the data when he spotted the unusual signal on a computer printout. He was so surprised that he wrote WOW next to it, and that's how the signal got its famous name. The signal also has another, not so exciting name, 6EQJ5. Some people thought it might be a hidden message, but it actually just shows how the signal's intensity changed over time. The WOW signal sparked all kinds of theories. Some people believed it was a sign of extraterrestrial life, while others were sure that it was some interference from human activities. There were those who believed it could be a natural phenomenon we didn't understand yet. New research seems to have finally solved the mystery, but there's one thing we'll talk about a bit later. First, let's get into detail. A team of scientists, led by Abel Mendez from the Planetary Habitability Laboratory at the University of Puerto Rico at Arecibo, revisited the mystery using data from the now-closed Arecibo Radio Telescope, collected between 2017 and 2020. These observations were similar to those made by Big Ear, but they had better sensitivity, resolution, and polarization measurements. Arecibo detected signals similar to the WOW signal, but there were some important differences. These signals were less intense and came from multiple locations. The scientists believe that these signals, including the original WOW signal, can be explained by natural events in space. Their theory sounds like this. The WOW signal was likely caused by a sudden brightening of hydrogen due to a strong, short-lived radiation source. It could be a magnetar flare or a soft gamma repeater, SGR. A magnetar is a neutron star with a way stronger magnetic field than ordinary neutron stars. And an SGR is an astronomical object which emits large bursts of gamma rays and X-rays at irregular intervals. In any case, such events are pretty rare and depend on very specific conditions. But they can cause hydrogen clouds to light up for short periods. According to the researchers, what Big Ear picked up in 1977 was one of those bright hydrogen clouds in its line of sight. The study suggests that the signal's rarity can be explained by the precise alignment needed between the radiation source, the hydrogen cloud, and the observer. It means that the WOW signal may actually be the first recorded instance of an astronomical maser flare in the hydrogen line. A shocking theory claims that mysterious comet Oumuamua might be a von Neumann probe, an alien spacecraft with broken engines tumbling through our solar system. It sounds extremely unsettling, but first things first, what is a von Neumann probe? Mathematician John von Neumann suggested the concept of self-replicating spacecraft that could in some ways mimic the features of living organisms or viruses. People started to refer to such hypothetical spacecraft as von Neumann probes. Von Neumann was sure that using self-replicating spacecraft would be the most effective way to perform large-scale mining operations, like mining asteroid belts or moons. The creators of such probes could take advantage of their exponential growth. Hypothetically, a self-replicating spaceship could be sent to a neighboring planetary system and look for raw materials there. Such materials could be extracted from moons, gas giant planets, asteroids, and the likes. Using these materials, the probe could make replicas of itself. The replicas could then be sent to other planetary systems, and the original probe could pursue its main purpose within its parent star system. This pattern sure does repeat the reproduction patterns of bacteria. That's why some experts think that von Neumann machines could be considered a form of life. There's also a theory that a self-replicating spacecraft could spread throughout a galaxy the size of the Milky Way in just 500,000 years, even if it used conventional theoretical methods of interstellar travel. In other words, it wouldn't even need to employ exotic faster-than-light propulsion. In 1981, mathematical physicist and cosmologist Frank Tipler argued that extraterrestrial intelligence couldn't exist because people had never observed von Neumann probes. Even if we take a moderate rate of replication, such probes should already be common throughout space. So, it's really weird that we haven't come across any of those yet. It might only mean that extraterrestrial intelligence doesn't exist. A response to Tipler's arguments came from astronomers Carl Sagan and William Newman. They pointed out that Tipler might have underestimated the rate of replication, and von Neumann probes should have already started consuming most of the mass in our galaxy. Therefore, any intelligent race would avoid designing von Neumann probes in the first place and try to destroy any probes as soon as they found them. Another objection to the prevalence of von Neumann probes is that civilizations that could potentially design such devices have an extremely high probability of self-destruction before producing such a machine. In any case, the assumed capacity of von Neumann probes is unlikely in reality. But then, how about Oumuamua? These days, scientists are using high-tech scanners to examine a huge, cigar-shaped comet, which might or might not be an alien probe. One idea is that it's an extraterrestrial civilization spacecraft, with broken engines wandering through our solar system. If that's the case, the object could easily be a von Neumann probe. Dr. Jason Wright from Penn State University thinks that a broken alien spaceship could move in exactly the same way as Oumuamua. Rather than moving through space like other space rocks, the 1,318-foot-long, 118-foot-wide space traveler is tumbling through the solar system. At the moment, it's traveling at a speed of around 200,000 miles per hour. In his blog, Dr. Wright says that if such derelict craft were not traveling fast enough to escape the galaxy, they could thermalize with the stars and end up drifting around like an interstellar asteroid or comet. They wouldn't have attitude control anymore and would eventually start tumbling. And it could distinguish them from regular interstellar asteroids. Plus, even though their propulsion was broken, their radio transmitters could work just fine. In any case, so far, It's just a theory, and further research is needed. What do you think? Is Oumuamua just a space rock or an alien space probe?
Now, let's pretend that humanity faces a huge threat from outer space. So we'll imagine that a giant planet-eating octopus comes to our solar system to eat Venus, Mars, Earth, Jupiter, and other planets, except Saturn. Therefore, people decide to move to the big planet with giant rings. Fortunately, they already have cool technologies that allow them to make such trips. So we get into giant ships, take off, and fly to Saturn. Life on the planet itself is impossible because it has no solid ground. The ship won't be able to land there. This is a giant gas ball that is 9 times wider than Earth. To compare their sizes, look at a 5-cent coin and a baseball. And the planet's atmosphere consists mainly of hydrogen and helium. So if the ship starts to land, it'll never reach solid ground. And the lower it goes, the higher the pressure it will experience. Eventually, the ship will just be crushed. Therefore, we have only one choice: the rings of Saturn. They're made up of giant, medium-sized, and tiny particles of ice and rock flying around the gas giant at tremendous speed. They were formed from comets flying by. Saturn's gravity knocked these celestial bodies off their course and crushed them with its pressure. Fragments of these comets began to accumulate around Saturn, forming rings. Now, some of these particles fly faster, some are slower. The closest to the planet is the D ring. It's followed by rings C and B. Then there's a large gap called Cassini division. Rings A, F, G, and E come after. This classification is very convenient for creating a ring map. So people approach the rings, but don't dare to land on them. First, they send test capsules with robots to scout the area. The robots choose a suitable location on the E ring. In fact, the distance between the rocks is quite large, and the ship can easily fly there. There are tiny particles, huge rocks the size of houses, and comets the size of a whole mountain. The first robot flies up to a large rock at high speed. At this moment, a baseball-sized stone pierces the robot's body. Another robot gets smashed between 2 colliding boulders. The third robot gets caught in a rain of sharp icicles and breaks. People have big engineering workshops on their ships, so they build new capsules and new robots. This time they're made of more durable materials, so the robots reach a big rock again. A few particles crash into them but don't break through the armor. The machine set up a small station on a flying rock where people can live. But after a couple of hours, a big chunk of asteroid smashes the station. Well, seems like we need another strategy. Giant ships scan the entire area of the E-ring and calculate the trajectories of billions of stones. After lengthy calculations, people finally find the perfect places in the middle of this chaos that will stay intact for a long time. They land on these large rocks in their capsules and begin to settle down. They build stations and small houses and install powerful batteries on them. Saturn is located at a distance of 9.5 astronomical units from the Sun. 1 unit is the distance from the Sun to Earth. So Saturn is a pretty cold place. That's why there's so much ice flying around it. But how to get the energy to heat it all up? There's too little of it on large ships. Besides, solar panels are ineffective here because of the great distance from the Sun. Therefore, scientists create a way to generate kinetic energy from flying stones. It's like a windmill. When the wind drives the fans, these movements are converted into energy. So engineers build panels that collect power from the moving stones. But it doesn't slow the speed of rocks down because Saturn's gravity continues to move them. Thus, people receive a source of almost limitless energy. Some space stations have plants and trees that produce oxygen through photosynthesis. Only instead of sunlight, they get energy from ultraviolet. Then people fill large tanks with oxygen and carry them to their homes. People begin to occupy the adjacent rings. You don't need a lot of fuel to get from one place to another. You can land on a rock, calculate its route, and wait for it to bring you to the needed point. Then you can move to another one, and so on, until you reach your destination. More and more people leave their ships and move to the rings. It seems that life is getting better, But then psychological problems begin. Constant movement in the vacuum of space drives everyone mad. Imagine living on a carousel that never stops. You can't walk to the store whenever you want because it always flies away. No one can go out for a walk, even in a spacesuit, because there's a chance to come across a rock flying at high speed. You can't plan anything because, at the moment, your plans can be ruined by a giant piece of ice. Computers don't help either. They can't calculate the trajectories of all space bodies. Rocks tend to break and split into hundreds of smaller ones. Also, new comets fly by and also become part of the rings. All this creates uncertainty and causes a sense of anxiety in people. Besides, it's dark, cold, and very lonely on the rings. Now think about building a base on a space object, but your best friend lands on another one a few miles away. Then, a giant icicle crashes into his rock and increases its speed. And a few days later, your friend is too far away. And it happens all the time. The only way to change your life is to settle on one of Saturn's moons. The planet has 83 of them. People have already confirmed and named 63, and the existence of 20 others has yet to be confirmed. They're all like different worlds. Some of them may be habitable, and the best candidate among them is Titan. There may be water on it, and its atmospheric pressure is only 1.5 times greater than Earth's. Its atmosphere consists of nitrogen and a little methane, forming carbon smog in Titan's upper layers. For this reason, we can't study this moon from Earth. But the coolest thing is that Titan flies outside the rings of Saturn. This means people can lead a quiet life there. There's also satellite Phoebe, covered with craters like our moon. This giant celestial body looks more like a gigantic meteorite. People have a lot of choices of where to start a new life. During a couple of hundred years spent on ships near Saturn, humanity would learn everything about its satellites. But why did they try to live on the rings? Why didn't they land on one of the moons from the very beginning? Because, well, then this video would be less fun and a whole lot shorter. But what if we were initially born inside the rings of Saturn? Let's say a massive meteorite with frozen water got caught by the planet's gravity. There were the simplest life forms inside the ice, and then this life began to acquire more developed forms. Imagine that the large rock managed to remain untouched for hundreds of millions of years, and during this time, humans appeared. But of course, they would be very different there. Firstly, they wouldn't experience gravitational forces. This would make them taller, but weaker. People's skin would be pale because of the lack of light, but very hardy thanks to cold temperatures. Particles of ice and grains of sand flying in space would roughen people's skin. In such biological armor, without gravity, they would jump from one rock to another in search of food and water. And, by the way, that would be the main problem. How would people survive without oxygen in the vacuum of space? Where would they get their food? Saturn's rings are a pretty lifeless and dangerous place. If there are not even the simplest forms of life there, then how could such a complex one as the human appear? Therefore, even in theory, the appearance of people would be impossible there.
Before J. Robert Oppenheimer ended up as the leader of the Manhattan Project, he was one of scientists studying nuclear physics under some of the most extreme conditions you can only imagine. By that, I mean the gravitational collapse of the most massive stars in the universe. Oppenheimer was part of the first team ever to determine the upper bound to the mass of cold, non-rotating neutron stars. Stars more massive than that limit collapse into a black hole. A star is an enormous collection of mass, dominated by hydrogen and a substantial fraction of helium, as well as some amounts of other elements. Its ginormous force of gravity works non-stop to pull all that mass inward. And the question here is, why don't such objects gravitationally collapse? For example, a star like our Sun has around 300,000 the mass of Earth. At the same time, it's only about 1/4 as dense as our planet. There must be some kind of internal force generated within the star itself and pushing back against gravitation. Scientists have been studying stellar evolution for many years. And here's the basic picture. In the majority of stars, pressure comes from thermonuclear reactions, due to which stars glow. In thermonuclear reactions, light elements are converted into heavier ones, and energy is released. When a star is running out of light elements, it has two options: to become a red giant and then a white dwarf, or to explode as a supernova and then become a neutron star or black hole. Most astronomers eventually came to the conclusion that under the extreme pressures and temperatures, a series of nuclear reactions could occur, leading to hydrogen nuclei getting converted into helium nuclei, releasing energy in the process. This released energy would provide huge amounts of outward radiation pressure, allowing most stars to shine for extremely long periods of time and holding them up against gravitational collapse. But unlike most scientists working on this problem, Oppenheimer was more interested in another aspect. What would happen to a star when it eventually exhausted its nuclear fuel it was burning to hold itself up against gravitational collapse? The scientists knew that without a source of fuel within a star, gravitation would gain the upper hand, and the core of the star would start contracting. There wouldn't be enough time for heat to be exchanged between the interior and exterior environments, and the same amount of heat would get compressed into an increasingly smaller volume. Today, we know that increasing the temperature of the helium-rich core of a giant star will release more energy than fusing hydrogen into helium, and stars as massive as the Sun eventually initiate helium fusion. But what happens when a star runs out of helium fuel in its core? Eventually, it'll stop emitting radiation too. The core will begin to contract, heating it up even more. Some stars, like the Sun, can't heat up enough to start any further nuclear burning reaction. So the core, mostly made of such elements as carbon and oxygen, contracts and contracts until there's no way to do it further. After all, there's a limit to how far a star can contract, and it's set not by the thermal radiation pressure of a living star, but by a certain quantum mechanical effect. No two electrons, an example of a type of particle known as a fermion, can occupy the same quantum state. That's why such types of stellar remains can hold themselves up against gravitational collapse. These remnants are physical objects nowadays known as white dwarfs, with higher temperatures and densities at their cores than at the exteriors. Still, there must be a limit to how massive a white dwarf can be. Beyond a certain mass, the size of this space object might be predicted to collapse to zero. Once a critical density is reached, either further nuclear reactions must take place, or a white dwarf must collapse further, which might lead to the appearance of a black hole. Oppenheimer chose to dwell on a different aspect of the problem, though. He asked, what would happen to the most massive stars, those whose temperatures and densities rose to unbelievable heights after they had burned through both their hydrogen and helium fuel sources? When a massive enough carbon core of a star contracts, it becomes so hot it can initiate carbon fusion, which leads to the creation of such elements as neon. As the neon core contracts and heats up, the burning of this element occurs at even higher temperatures. Eventually, it gets blasted apart by high-energy photons into oxygen. The core contracts and rises in temperature again, which leads to oxygen fusion and the production of such elements as silicon and sulfur. After exhausting all its oxygen, the core contracts even further, and silicon burning occurs. Sulfur, argon, calcium, iron, titanium, chromium, and nickel start building up, and the core becomes inert. A core collapse supernova follows soon. At that time, Oppenheimer didn't know such details, but he still came to an important realization. Any nuclear reaction would eventually run into a limit. The limit of having the entire core of a star behave as one single atomic nucleus. That nucleus would also have a limit of how massive it could be. If you compress a proton and an electron under high enough pressure and temperature, it will turn into a neutron through the process of electron capture. Oppenheimer's calculations were based on the Pauli exclusion principle. What is it? There are two types of particles. Bosons can be compared to extroverts. Imagine that you need to accommodate a lot of people in a hotel. Extroverts can be accommodated in a hostel. It will be fun, and they won't mind being cramped up there. But fermions are like introverts. If each room is a separate quantum state, then two electrons cannot live together. They need to be housed one at a time. This is the Pauli exclusion principle. Fermions, very roughly speaking, repulse each other. And this repulsion keeps the final stages of stellar evolution from collapse. Take a neutron star, compress it further, add some mass to it, and decrease its volume. At one point, you'll hit the same limit white dwarfs have. Oppenheimer reasoned that the same physical effects could come into play here. Whether you have a group of protons, neutrons, or electrons doesn't matter. They're all examples of fermions and obey the same principle. No two of them can occupy the same quantum state. This creates a pressure that pushes outward, preventing the stellar remnant, be it a white dwarf or a neutron star, from exceeding a certain critical value for its mass. The equation for that maximum mass value for the simplest model of a neutron star, cold and non-rotating, was first created by Oppenheimer and Volkoff. Today, it's known as the Tolman-Oppenheimer-Volkoff limit. According to it, the maximum possible mass for a non-rotating neutron star is somewhere around 2.2 to 2.9 solar masses. How do modern-day predictions that developed out of Oppenheimer's work stack up to the observations we have for neutron stars? Actually, very well. For example, the most massive neutron star with accurate distance and mass measurements is this millisecond pulsar. Although it rotates rapidly, it has a mass of 2.08 solar masses. In 2017, astronomers saw the first merger of two neutron stars ever. The combined mass of the stars taking part in the merger was around 2.75 solar masses. Those stars briefly formed a neutron star before collapsing into a black hole. And finally, in 2019, the second merger of two neutron stars was observed. But in this case, the combined mass of the two stars was around 3.3 to 3.7 solar masses. This time, the post-merger remnant turned straight into a black hole with no neutron star intermediary. It's a tricky feat to find the highest mass neutron star and the lowest mass black hole, since figuring out the properties of these objects is very difficult due to the fact that they're relatively rare. Plus, they're mostly located thousands of light years away from us and aren't known for being bright. Still, with constantly improving pulsar timing technology, the discovery of new neutron stars within the Milky Way, as well as neutron star mergers, sounds more realistic. Soon, we might discover where the neutron star / black hole mass limit lies. As for Oppenheimer, his most lasting contribution to the world might be developing a method for theoretically understanding the upper mass limit that defines the boundary between a black hole and a neutron star.
Attention, attention! Something very exciting is going on Saturn. It's called a spoke season, and no, the planet isn't turning into a giant gaseous wheel. Let me tell you more about this phenomenon. Each year, NASA's Hubble Space Telescope devotes some of its time to observing Saturn, a gas giant, like me, the second largest planet in the solar system. And this space body always has something new to surprise us with. For example, look at one of the latest images of the gas giant. See those smudgy spokes? They mean that Saturn's spoke season is starting. Like our planet, Saturn is tilted on its axis. That's why it has 4 seasons. But since the orbit of the gas giant is much larger, each of these seasons lasts about 7 Earth years. Keep this in mind, it's important. Now, the next thing we need to talk about to understand the concept of the unique spoke season on Saturn is the equinox. On Earth, it's the moment when the sun is exactly above the equator of the planet, and day and night are of the same length. But on Saturn, it's something a bit different. An equinox occurs when Saturn's rings are tilted edge-on to the sun. And even though equinoxes on Saturn happen every spring and fall, just like on our planet, they actually occur very seldom, roughly once in 15 Earth years. That's why astronomers are so excited about this event. Now look, there are 2 smudgy spokes in this ring. It's called Ring B on the left of the picture. They resemble the spokes on a bicycle. The shading and shape of spokes vary. They may seem dark or light, it depends on the angle and illumination. Sometimes they might look like blobs instead of something with a classical radial spoke shape. They also don't last long, but more and more will start to appear the closer we're to May 6, 2025. That's when the autumnal equinox on Saturn will occur. But what causes the spokes? Astronomers think it might be the gas giant's magnetic field. When a planetary magnetic field interacts with the solar wind, it creates an electrically charged environment. On Earth, this results in northern lights, also called aurora borealis. And if we speak about Saturn, the tiniest icy ring particles might get charged too. And it probably temporarily levitates these particles above the larger boulders the rings consist of. For the first time, the spokes in Saturn's rings were spotted by NASA's Voyager mission. It happened in the early 1980s. At the time, we didn't know that these spokes were a seasonal phenomenon. Voyager 2 just passed by the planet and then sped on. To figure out what these spokes were and how they functioned, astronomers needed a space telescope that could observe Saturn's rings from afar, like Hubble. The latest equinox on Saturn occurred in 2009. At that time, NASA's Cassini space probe was traveling around the gas giant. It sent many amazing images back to Earth. It quickly proved that the spokes weren't caused by gravitational interactions with Saturn or the influence of the gas giant's moons or small moonlets, which make up the planet's rings. It was the year 2005 when Cassini confirmed that the spokes were related to Saturn's magnetic field. That mission was finished in 2017. Now Hubble keeps its long-term monitoring of the changes on and around Saturn. Despite all the observations, astronomers still can't predict the beginning and duration of the spoke season. Luckily, Saturn's prominent rings are a perfect laboratory for studying this phenomenon. Because even though other gas giants in the solar system also have rings, those are not so visible, and scientists don't know whether spokes occur on those planets. But these spokes aren't the only exciting space phenomenon. Our solar system is a fascinating place. That's why. If you were standing at the Martian equator barefoot, your feet wouldn't get cold. The temperature there would feel like on a sunny spring day on Earth. But you'd have to wear a hat. At the height of your head, it would be freezing cold. Now Venus spins backward compared to most other planets in the solar system and the Sun itself. One of the explanations astronomers have come up with is a collision with some solid object, for example an asteroid, that happened in the past. Jupiter's moon Io has hundreds of volcanoes, which makes the satellite the most volcanically active object in the solar system. The moon also has a weird yellowish surface. It looks blotted and resembles a pepperoni pizza. Yum. Europa, one of Jupiter's 4 biggest moons, is covered in ice. This ice shell can be 10 to 15 miles thick. It also has some smooth patches, so if you're into ice skating, you would like it there. If you lump together all the known asteroids in the solar system, their total weight would still be smaller than 10% of the mass of our moon. Scientists believe that Mercury might still have a partially molten core. It could explain why Mercury has a magnetic field, even if it's just 1% as strong as Earth's. Mercury's core takes up around 42% of the planet's volume. Mercury also has wrinkles. When its iron core was cooling, the planet's crust contracted. It made the surface of the planet uneven. These wrinkles are called lobate scarps. The biggest of these scarps can be hundreds of miles long and up to a mile high. Uranus is the only planet in the solar system to rotate on its side. The reason might be an ancient mega-powerful collision with an Earth-sized object, but so far it's just a theory. Mars might get a set of rings of its own in the next 70 million years. Its largest moon, called Phobos, is orbiting closer and closer to the planet. One day, it's likely to get broken apart by the gravitational pull of the red planet and turn into a ring that can last for millions of years. I won't be around then, so I'll just take their word for it. Scientists think that the moon's surface has more craters than Earth's because it doesn't have so much natural activity going on. Winds, rains, earthquakes, and erosion keep altering the surface of our planet, but the moon has almost no weather to change its appearance. Saturn is the most flattened planet in the solar system. It's squished at the poles, and any point on the equator is about 4,000 miles farther from the center of the planet than the poles. The Hubble Space Telescope weighs almost as much as 2 male African elephants and is as long as a big school bus. Yeah, that's a launch I'd love to see. 2 elephants in a school bus. It's made almost 1.5 million observations since it was launched in 1990. Astronomers have used this data to write about 15,000 scientific papers. Everything on Earth and everything people can see in space with the help of telescopes is normal matter. It's made up of atoms and molecules and adds up to less than 5% of the universe. Almost 68% of the universe is dark energy, and the remaining 27% is dark matter. Does that really matter? As a matter of fact, it does. Saturn has a mysterious vortex whirling over the planet's south pole. The whole thing resembles an enormous hurricane-like storm, measuring almost 5,000 miles across. That's 2/3 the diameter of Earth. What confuses astronomers is that although the phenomenon looks like a hurricane, it doesn't behave like one. Saturn is also the only planet in the solar system that's less dense than water. In other words, if you found a bathtub huge enough to fit this gas giant, it would float there like a rubber duck. Earthquakes on the moon don't occur as often as on our planet, but when they do, it happens closer to the center of the satellite. Scientists think moonquakes might be caused by the gravity of Earth and the Sun. One of Saturn's moons, Iapetus, has bizarre two-tone coloring. The difference between the moon's two hemispheres is great. One of them is light and the other is eerily dark. Scientists haven't figured out this mystery yet. Now, the only asteroid belt in the solar system astronauts know about is between Mars and Jupiter. There are thousands of asteroids in this area. They're irregularly shaped solid objects of different sizes, but all of them are way smaller than a planet. Scientists have analyzed the chemical content of some meteorites found in the Sahara Desert, Antarctica, and other places. Some of the rocks turned out to have a Martian origin. Others arrived from the Moon or the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Ooh, space rocks. So we can also say, space rocks. Yeah, we could say that. NASA is on the hunt for Dyson spheres. Turns out there are 60 stars that give off weird light patterns. This means there might be some extraterrestrial technology nearby. A team of scientists has developed a new way to search for advanced civilizations by looking for Dyson spheres. All forms of life, from microbes to us, need energy in order to survive. As living creatures keep evolving, their energy needs grow. We started with small fires, then moved on to coal, oil, and eventually solar panels. Now imagine a super advanced civilization that has used up all the energy sources on its planet. What's next? Their host star, an almost limitless power source. This is where the idea of Dyson spheres comes in. It was made up by the physicist Freeman Dyson in the 1960s. This idea says that, hypothetically, we could build an incredibly big structure around a star to capture its energy, like some sort of gigantic solar panel. Advanced civilizations could use it to power their planet and even interstellar travel. Right now, something like this would be impossible for us to build, but maybe someone else in the universe has managed to pull that off. Scientists gathered lots of data from surveys of stars. They analyzed over 5 million objects and found some candidates. Of course, extraterrestrial civilizations might have completely different technology, so astronomers aren't looking for actual giant shells around stars. Instead, they're looking for technosignatures. These are weird things that might indicate the presence of something technological and can't be explained by known natural sources like galaxies or nebula. For example, a structure like a Dyson sphere could give off unusual infrared radiation. This is because, while absorbing a star's energy, this structure would give off crazy amounts of heat. Out of millions, they identified 368 potential candidates. Further filtering left them with only 7 objects that could be Dyson spheres. Now, usually, weird infrared flickering happens from giant crashes in space, like planetary collisions. Warmed-up dust and rocks get scattered around and give off strange lighting patterns. These are called extreme debris disks. The researchers think these 7 objects could be M-type stars, also called red dwarfs. These are stars that are very small on the space scale and a bit fainter than our Sun, a yellow dwarf. Stars like that don't usually have warm dust and rocks around them, but scientists need to do more tests, like looking at the light in detail, to be sure about their discovery. There was another study that found 53 star candidates with similar excess infrared radiation. But these also need to be checked. Scientists plan to use advanced tools like the James Webb Space Telescope to take a closer look at all these candidates. One famous candidate is Tabby's star. Scientists even made a joking name for it because the paper about this star had the subtitle, "Where's the Flux?" Think of an acronym yourself. Now, it's a bit hotter and more massive than our Sun. It's caught NASA's attention because of its unusual, irregular light dimming. For some reason, it doesn't glow like a normal star, but blinks, as if someone turns on and off a flashlight. At first, you might think this is just because some big planet is passing in front of it, or a comet. But we're talking up to a 22% drop in light. No planet could manage to eclipse a quarter of a star, and that's where the name comes in. So, another explanation is a Dyson sphere or some similar megastructure. Someone also suggested that the dips might be caused by fragments from a broken exomoon orbiting the star. There are other stars that show similar traits, but there's no solid evidence to support this. So for now, scientists just don't know. So, astronomers are on the hunt for any giant structures. There are many variations of what a Dyson sphere could look like: rings, bubbles, a swarm of satellites, a giant shell, and so on. A Dyson shell would be a solid, rigid shell completely enclosing the star. This is the most extreme option, the hardest one to build. Also, if other civilizations built that thing, it would fully cover the star's light, and we simply wouldn't see it. The inner surface of this shell could be lined with habitats, and we could simulate gravity by rotating the structure around the Sun. A Dyson swarm is the simplest option, a bunch of solar-collecting satellites and habitats orbiting the star. It would be a lovely place, with people living in many space stations or mini space houses within the swarm. Each little habitat would have its own air, life support systems, and artificial gravity. We could also grow our little farms there. And imagine the view. We would see a constant bright sky with other habitats visible across the expanse. A near unlimited energy of a star would mean we could advance our technology very fast, manufacture tons of materials, and terraform planets within the star system. But building and maintaining a Dyson sphere would require advanced robotics, AI, and tons of money. It would take us centuries or millennia to get there. Now, giant megastructures aren't the only things that scientists are looking for in order to find extraterrestrial life. They also look at the planets. Now, planets must have certain characteristics to be potential homes. There should be liquid water and an energy source, something to drive these reactions, creating the building blocks of life. Turns out such conditions aren't rare at all. Our search showed that there might be more than 60 billion potential habitable planets in the Milky Way alone. Unfortunately, we can't look at them directly or land there. So we have to use tricks, like detecting water and good gases in their atmosphere. Recently, the James Webb Space Telescope found possible signs of life on a planet called K218b, which is pretty close, about 120 light-years from Earth. This planet is 9 times the size of Earth. It has clouds of liquid water but a different atmosphere, full of gases like methane, carbon dioxide, and dimethyl sulfide. Regular oxygen-breathing life wouldn't do well at all there, but on Earth, dimethyl sulfide is produced by life forms like phytoplankton. They also discovered that weird wiggly planets could be signs of advanced extraterrestrial civilizations. In our solar system, each planet has its own orbit. But the universe likes to surprise us. Surprise! Models show that there might be planets that share the same orbit. For example, it's possible if the planets are evenly spaced around the star, minimizing their gravitational impact on each other. Or the so-called horseshoe configuration, when planets speed up and slow down in relation to each other, moving in funny wiggly ways. These horseshoe systems can hold up to 24 planets. This is one of those things that are possible, but very unlikely without some help. Normally, gravity would immediately destabilize such systems. This means that if we ever find a star system with 24 planets sharing orbits, it might indicate that some advanced civilization decided to lend a hand. They also might contact us themselves. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence began in the 1960s when astronomer Frank Drake started listening for radio signals from space. Today, they persist. Astronomers listen for leakage radiation from other civilizations, which are radio waves unintentionally sent into space from everyday activities. Recently, they detected radio waves from YZ Ceti b, a planet super close to us, just 12 light-years away. This means it might have a magnetic field, invisible shields that are very important for protecting life from the solar radiation. But YZ Ceti b is probably too close to its star to be habitable. But there are a lot of places for such a signal to come from. It turns out there are 1,000 star systems in our galaxy where they can see us in the sky. All these stars have a perfect view of Earth passing in front of the Sun, making it easy for potential extraterrestrial astronomers to spot us. So, there are over 1,000 star systems that could be watching us right now. And if we study them, we might one day find evidence of intelligent life looking back at us. Hello!